My grandmother used to say that every family has one person who sees everything but never says a word about it. She meant herself, I think. She was the type who'd refill your tea before you even noticed it was cold, who'd leave money under a dish without making it a thing. She saw people, she just never made them feel seen in an uncomfortable way. I think about her a lot now, especially when I think about Zayed. Zayed is my cousin, 2 years older than me. We grew up in the same city but on opposite sides of it, his family in the newer part of town with the wide roads and the shopping centers, mine in the older neighborhoods where the alleyways smelled like cardamom and old concrete. We weren't close in the way that some cousins are close. We weren't enemies either. We were just parallel, two lives running in the same direction without ever touching. Until the summer I turned 22. That was the summer my uncle had the surgery, and for 2 weeks almost the entire extended family took turns sleeping at the hospital, making food, watching the younger kids. And somehow, because my mom needed someone to stay at the old family house to maintain it and receive guests, and because Zayed was the only adult cousin without a job that summer, he'd just finished his master's and was waiting on a visa, we ended up living together. Just the two of us, in that big, drafty house that smelled like rose water and dust and everything that used to be. I want you to understand something before I go further. I had a secret, not a small one, not the kind you tuck away and forget about. This was the kind of secret that had been slowly reshaping my entire personality for years, quietly the way water reshapes stone. I was gay. And I had never told a single person, not one, not even in a journal, because I was scared of words existing somewhere I couldn't control. I'd built a whole life around not being found out. I dated a girl in university for almost 8 months because the alternative was answering questions. I'd learned how to look through people instead of at them, how to exist in a room full of family without ever fully being in the room. I was good at it. I'd been doing it for so long it didn't even feel like lying anymore. It just felt like breathing. So the idea of spending 2 weeks with Zayed with anyone felt manageable. I could do 2 weeks. I'd done 22 years. The first few days were fine. Awkward, sure, but fine. We made small talk over coffee in the mornings. He'd watch football in the evenings and I'd sit nearby scrolling my phone and we'd exchange comments about whatever was on screen. He was easy to be around, quieter than I expected. I remembered him being louder at family gatherings, more performative, more of a show-off. But in private he was different, softer. He made his own bed. He apologized when he accidentally used my shampoo. It was on the fifth night that something shifted. I don't know what started it. I think we'd run out of small talk. We were sitting on the roof. The house had this flat roof you could access through a hatch, and people used to sleep up there in the summers when I was a kid, and we were just sitting there with tea, not talking, watching the city hum below us. And then Zayed said out of nowhere, "You seem tired." Not physically tired, he said it in a way that meant something else, like he was carefully placing a word down in front of me and watching to see if I'd pick it up. I said, "I'm fine." He didn't push, he just nodded and looked back at the city. But something about the way he said it sat in my chest for the rest of the night, because I was tired. So deeply tired in a way I had no language for. The kind of tiredness that doesn't come from not sleeping but from performing constantly, from never being able to put yourself down. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay there in the dark of my uncle's old room and stared at the ceiling and thought, he doesn't know anything, he was just making conversation. It means nothing. I almost convinced myself. The next evening I made a mistake. It wasn't dramatic. That's the thing nobody tells you about the moments that change your life, they rarely are. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop and I'd gotten a message from someone I'd been carefully, quietly talking to for a few months. A guy. His name was Kareem. We'd never met in person. We'd connected through a private forum and we'd been talking about everything: books, family, what it felt like to be invisible in your own life. Nothing inappropriate. Just two people who understood each other. He'd sent me a long message, a really long one, the kind that makes your heart do something embarrassing. I was reading it with this expression on my face that I can only describe as unguarded, because I was alone, or I thought I was alone, and I'd let my face do whatever it wanted for once. I didn't hear Zayed come downstairs. I didn't notice him until he set a glass of water next to me on the table, and I startled so hard I nearly knocked the laptop off. He laughed, stepped back with his hands up. Sorry, you looked thirsty." I closed the laptop too fast, way too fast. There was a pause, brief, and then Zayed went to the fridge and got something out and didn't say anything, and I sat there with my pulse doing something violent in my throat. I replayed the moment in my head over and over. What did he see? How much could he have read? The laptop was tilted, the screen wasn't fully facing him. Maybe nothing, maybe just my face. Just my stupid, open face reading a message from a man who made me feel less alone. I avoided him the whole next day. I invented errands. I offered to go pick up things from the pharmacy to visit an aunt who hadn't asked to be visited. Zayed let me. He didn't call attention to it. He just texted once to ask if I wanted anything from the bakery and I said no thanks. That evening when I got back, he was cooking. He'd made enough for two. He didn't say I made enough for you or make it a thing, he just set two plates out like it was obvious. We ate quietly, some show was on in the background, and somewhere between the first and second plate he said without looking at me, I had a friend, in graduate school, his name was Farouk. I kept eating, didn't respond. We were close, he said, like actually close, the kind of close that doesn't happen that often. He paused. He came out to me in our second year, he was terrified, he didn't sleep for 2 days before he told me after. He almost smiled at that. I didn't know what to say, I wasn't bad about it, but I wasn't good either, I was just kind of stunned. And I said something like, okay, thanks for telling me, which is, it's not the worst thing to say, but it's not exactly warm, you know. I was looking at my plate, very carefully looking at my plate. He laughed it off, Zayed continued. He said he was relieved, but I could tell, the way he laughed, he'd needed more than that from me and I hadn't given it to him, and then a few months later he moved to another city and we sort of lost touch, and I always wished I don't know, been better at it. Silence. I said, why are you telling me this? He looked at me then, and he shrugged, but it wasn't a dismissive shrug. It was more like he was trying to make himself smaller so I didn't feel cornered. I don't know, he said, it just felt like something worth saying. I nodded, I put my fork down, I picked it up again. We watched the rest of the show. I want to tell you that I said something meaningful that night, that I had some moment of clarity and confessed everything and we embraced and it was beautiful. But that's not what happened. What happened is I went to bed feeling like I'd been turned inside out without anyone touching me, like I'd been examined without being examined. I lay in the dark and thought about Farouk. Some guy I'd never met who'd been brave enough to say out loud what I'd spent years burying, and I thought about Zayed sitting across from him and not knowing what to say. I thought, he's trying to say he'd do better now. And then I thought, but what if I'm wrong? What if this is a test? What if he already knows and he's waiting for me to confirm it so he can tell my parents? What if this whole conversation was a trap dressed up as a story about someone else? I knew, even thinking about it, that this was the paranoia talking, that this was what years of hiding does to you. It makes you unable to accept that someone might simply be kind, but knowing it and feeling it are two different things. I didn't sleep until almost 4 in the morning. 2 days later I called Kareem. We'd never actually spoken on the phone before, it was always text, but I was sitting on the roof again late and I needed to hear a voice. I needed to hear a voice that knew who I actually was. He picked up on the third ring. We talked for almost 2 hours, about everything and nothing, about what it felt like to grow up the way we'd grown up, about the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people who love you and still feeling like the loneliest person in every room. At some point I got emotional, not crying, I'm not a crier, I never have been, but my voice went rough and I stopped mid-sentence and couldn't find the end of it. Kareem said, hey, you don't have to finish that. I said, I know, I'm tired of being careful all the time. I know, he said, I know. I didn't hear the roof hatch open. I didn't hear anything until I glanced over and saw Zayed standing there, holding 2 cups of tea, clearly having walked into the middle of something he hadn't expected to walk into. He saw my face, he saw the phone. He put the cups down on the ledge of the roof, said quietly, sorry, and started back toward the hatch. I said, wait. I don't know why I said that. He stopped. I told Kareem I'd call him back. I put the phone down, and I looked at Zayed, who was standing there very carefully, not looking at me, giving me whatever space I seemed to need. I said, it's not what you probably think. He said, you don't owe me an explanation. I said, I know I don't. Another pause, the city below us, some car alarm going off somewhere in the distance. It kind of is what you probably think, I said. Zayed picked up one of the cups, held it in both hands. I looked out at the city. Okay, he said. Just okay, that word, the most ordinary word in any language, deployed at exactly the right moment. I said, are you going to ask me anything? He thought about it, are you happy? I almost laughed because no one had ever asked me that before, not in the context of this, not in any context. What kind of question is that? The only one that matters to me, he said. And I didn't know what to do with that. I genuinely didn't. Because the answer was complicated. The answer was that I was the unhappiest kind of happy, the happy of someone who'd gotten good at surviving something that shouldn't require survival. But I also wasn't going to say that out loud on a rooftop to my cousin at midnight. So I said, I'm working on it. He nodded, that's a good answer. We drank the tea, we sat there for a long time without talking. At some point he said, for what it's worth, and you can tell me to shut up if you want, I think you're the most exhausting person to be in the same house with, and I've figured out why now. He glanced at me sideways. It's a lot of work carrying all that. I didn't say anything, but something in my chest released, just a little, like something that had been clenched for a long time let go by one notch. You don't have to tell me anything else, he said. Even if you don't want to, I'm saying I see you, that's all. And there it was, that thing my grandmother used to do, that thing I'd been missing my entire life. Someone who saw me and didn't immediately try to turn what they saw into a problem they needed to solve. I called Kareem back after Zayed went to bed. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, how do you feel? Weird, I said, like I put something down but I haven't figured out if I'm allowed to leave it there. You're allowed, he said. We ended up staying on the phone until almost 3, and somewhere in there he said something that I've thought about almost every day since. He said, I think the thing people don't understand is that coming out isn't one moment. It's 1,000 small moments where you let someone see a little more of you, and some of them happen without you deciding to let them happen, and that's okay too. I turned that over in my head for a long time after we hung up. The next morning at breakfast, Zayed made eggs. He made them the way I like, and I hadn't told him I liked them that way, which means he'd been paying attention at some point. He set the plate down, poured the tea, and then looked at me and said, is that guy you were talking to someone important to you? I looked up. Why? Because you looked different when you were talking to him, like more like yourself. He sat down, that's all. I looked down at the eggs. We haven't met in person yet. Are you going to? I don't know. Do you want to? I thought about it, and the fact that I was thinking about it in front of someone without panic rising in my throat, that was something. That was new. Yeah, I said, I think I do. Zayed nodded, drank his tea, let it be that simple. I think what I want to explain, and this is hard to put into words without making it sound smaller or bigger than it was, is that nothing about my life changed in those 2 weeks. I still hadn't told my parents. I still wasn't out to anyone except this one cousin who I'd spent most of my life barely knowing. I still had all the same fears I'd walked into that house with. But something internal had shifted, some internal weather patterns had changed. There's a specific kind of relief in being known, not understood, not accepted, just known, just having another person in the world look at you and have the most accurate picture of who you are. Zayed didn't fully understand me. He probably got things wrong, made assumptions, filled in blanks with guesses, but he knew, and he hadn't flinched. And I hadn't died. We had about 4 more days left in the house together when I told him more. Not everything, I didn't flood him with years of repression in one afternoon, but more. I told him about the girlfriend in university, about the specific performance of going to weddings and being asked about my plans. About the way I'd trained myself not to look at anyone in a way that might give anything away, and how that training had now bled into my entire personality so that I wasn't actually fully present in most conversations. He listened. He asked 2 or 3 questions, careful ones, the kind that showed he'd thought about what to ask rather than just saying whatever came to mind. At some point he said, does it feel different, saying it out loud? To you specifically? To anyone? I thought about it. Yeah, it does. Good or bad? Like, I don't know, like I'm hearing my own voice for the first time after thinking it was lost. He nodded slowly. That's a strange way to live. For years, I mean, that must have been so strange. It has become normal, I said. That's the worst part. It just becomes what existence feels like, and you don't know there's another way until someone. I stopped. Until someone what? I looked at him. Until someone sees you before you're ready to be seen, and it doesn't hurt. There was a moment of quiet. And then Zayed said, I'm really glad I didn't say, okay, thanks for telling me. I laughed, actually I laughed, the kind that surprises you when it comes out. You got better at it. Farouk would be pleased, he said. And he smiled this quiet, slightly sad smile, and I understood that he actually thought about that he actually carried that. On the last day we cleaned the house together. It was a full day of it, sweeping out corners, washing windows, packing up what needed packing, calling relatives about various logistical things. We were both exhausted by evening. We sat on the roof one last time with whatever was left in the tea, and the city was doing that thing it does in the late summer where the heat becomes something else, something almost beautiful after sunset. He said, what are you going to do about Karim? I looked up at the sky. I think I'm going to ask him if he wants to meet. Yes. Yeah. Zayed was quiet for a moment, then, you should do it soon before you talk yourself out of it. That obvious? A little bit. I smiled. I watched a plane cross overhead. Zayed. What? Thank you. He shook his head like thanks wasn't the right currency for this. Don't thank me, I was just there. He paused, that's all. And I thought, yes, that's everything, you were just there. I messaged Karim that night before I left the house. Just a short one. I said, I think I'm ready to stop talking about meetings and actually do it, if you want. He replied in maybe 40 seconds. I want to. He'd sent it with no punctuation, which somehow made it feel more real than anything formal would have. I just want to, bare and immediate and honest. I put the phone in my pocket and finished packing my bag, and when I came downstairs Zayed was at the door with his own bag, and we looked at each other and he said, Good summer, in a tone that meant about 17 other things. Good summer, I said back. He clapped me once on the shoulder, the kind of touch that in my family means, I love you, I see you, I've got you, and we never have to talk about any of that because we both know it. And then we went to our separate cars and I drove home to my apartment, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, the drive didn't feel like returning to hiding. It felt like arriving somewhere. Karim and I met 3 weeks later. A coffee place in a neighborhood neither of us lived in, neutral ground, both of us nervous in that specific way you're nervous when the person you're meeting already knows you well and yet has no idea what to do with your face. I got there first, sat at a corner table. I watched the door. When he walked in, I recognized him from photos, but he was also entirely different from what I'd assembled in my imagination. Shorter. His voice when he said my name was different from how it sounded on the phone, more textured somehow. He sat down and immediately knocked his bag off the chair, and we both went to grab it and our hands touched and we both straightened up and laughed in that embarrassed, relieved way. Hi, he said. Hi, I said. And that was it, that was the whole performance of it. After that we just talked, the same way we always had, like we'd been in the middle of a conversation that had just briefly paused. We were there for 3 hours. When we finally stood up to leave outside on the pavement, he said, I'm glad we did this. Me too. Are we going to do it again? I looked at him, this person who had held the most accurate version of me while I was still learning to hold it myself. And I said, yeah, I think we are. He smiled, not a big one, just a quiet one, the kind that means something. I called Zayed on the way home. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear football in the background. He turned it down. So he said. So I said. And I think maybe, yeah, I think maybe. He laughed. Actually, I laughed. A warm, real sound that I wouldn't have expected from him 2 months ago, before the summer, before the roof, before everything. Good, he said, that's good. I said, how's the visa thing going? Slowly. You'll get it. Probably. And then we just talked for a while about mundane things, about my uncle's recovery, about a terrible show Zayed was watching that he couldn't stop watching. Normal cousin things, the kind of conversation we never would have had a year ago. At some point before we hung up he said, hey, you sound different. Different how? Like, I don't know, present. I thought about that, about what it means to be present in your own life. About all the years I'd been hovering just outside myself, watching from a careful distance, never fully landing. I'm working on it, I said, same answer as the roof, but it felt different this time, less like resignation, more like a direction. That's still a good answer, he said. And then we said goodbye and hung up, and I drove the rest of the way home in the early evening light with the windows down. I want to end by saying something about my grandmother. About the things she used to do, refilling your tea, leaving money under a dish, seeing people without making them feel examined. I used to think that was a personality trait, something you were either born with or weren't. But I've started to think it's actually a choice. A small, daily, quiet choice to look at someone and decide, I will see what's there without making it a burden they have to carry. I will let them be who they are before they're ready to announce it. I will be there when they need someone to be there without requiring them to explain why they needed it. Zayed made that choice. In a drafty old house over bad tea on a rooftop at midnight over eggs made the way I like them. He made that choice over and over without fanfare. And it changed me, not because of anything big, no grand speech, no cinematic moment, no perfect thing said. Just I see you, that's all. That's everything. I think about that sometimes when I'm in a room with someone who looks the way I used to look, careful, contained, a little hollowed out from carrying something heavy for too long. I think about what it would mean to just put a cup of tea down next to them, to tell a story about someone else that isn't really about someone else, to ask out of nowhere, are you happy, and mean it. I haven't always been brave enough, but I'm getting there. The same way I'm getting to everything now, slowly, imperfectly present.